Great Wednesday. Welcome to the Fully Human Connections podcast. I'm your host, King, and I'm joined by my co-host, Reggie. How you doing today, Reggie?
I'm doing well, King. As I always say, it's Wednesday morning, and I get to spend an hour in conversation with you. So that's a good day for me.
So, as we start with our gratitude moments, what would you say you're grateful for today?
Yeah, I'm grateful for my usual gratitude for indoor plumbing and a refrigerator with food in it, and just a roof over my head. And now, is we actually had a 60+ degree day here in the Northeast in Connecticut yesterday. So there's a warming going on, even though some places still have about 3 or 4 inches of snow on the ground. So the spring is beginning to emerge. So I'm grateful for the warmth that's beginning to emerge. I say that with an asterisk next to it, since because the way the weather has been the last couple of years, I wouldn't be surprised by snow in May. So who knows how it's going to go? But I'm just grateful for the gradual warming um, of the outdoors, and for the human-made warming that's available indoors, because we're fortunate enough to have heat. So I'm really grateful for the basic day-to-day things that billions of people on the planet don't have. And I know I'm really fortunate to have heat, indoor plumbing, a refrigerator with food in it. So yeah, I don't need a lot to keep me happy.
Okay. Well, I concur with you on those things. I'm grateful for again in my life, health, ability to see, hear, walk, talk, stand, breathe, have sound mind, and another 24 hours to pursue my purpose in life, as you said, roof over my head,
Hmm.
amenities, electricity, heat, um, as well as this Sunday was my mother's birthday, and so got the family together and all her grandkids and everyone came by and we and she even saw an old friend of hers that she hadn't seen in years that had survived a stroke as well as
Hmm.
it I think had triple bypass, so she was able to see him. So it was really a great day for my mom. So I'm grateful to be alive, for her to be alive and have sound mind and experience that. And she's always said she want her flowers while she's here, not after she's gone. So she's been able to get her flowers, and grateful to be a part of that, and then really just experience that. So, and then grateful to get outside again today, and do my morning walk, and go outside and get exercise with my dog, and just grateful to be able to take in that part of the day, before I begin my day. As it's important. Now I've also added another outing with her in the evening, so now
Hmm.
I do two outings, and I'm just grateful for to be able to get out there and experience nature in that way. That's I'm really beginning to see one of the benefits of having a dog now, because now prior till I would say this mindset I'm in now, it's always been I'm just investing. It's like having a child. You just invest, 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 and you wait later on to get the payoff. So now I'm beginning to see the payoff in the context of just that sharing that with somebody, and because now I'm getting trained enough to the point where I can enjoy that as opposed to just having to be constantly fighting her and
Hmm.
dealing with that energy. So I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the story of your mom's birthday and the gathering. And it's just, yeah, that is a blessing to have your mom alive, and to be able to enjoy her, and to see her enjoy her family. So that's great. I really appreciate that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one more thing before we get started, I just wanted to see if now in the context of talking about healing America's narratives, is there, and before we get into today's topic, would you say there's something that's been, and I'm saying this more out of curiosity than more of a leading question,
Mhm.
in today's news of the last week or so, is there something that jumps out at you that's interesting,
Yeah. Well,
more interesting than before? That's kind of where I'm going with that. That that hasn't just been simmering, it's just new, that might be a narrative that you might want to address or bring
Yeah,
up?
it's not so much anything. I tell you, I wish there were something new. I mean, kind of newish was the bank failure, but that's not going to really, you know, that's not where I want to go with this. What's striking to me is, and this almost feel I'm not patting myself on the back or patting us on the back, but in terms of the conversations we've been having, there was a report this week around the 20th anniversary of the attack on Iraq, which was March 19th, 2003, when we first went in there. So that was its 20-year anniversary of that. And they spoke to some of the veterans who were now, who were in their teens or 20s back then, and now are in their late 30s and early 40s. And none of them think it was a good idea. Now, I'm not saying no veterans do, but of those who were interviewed, they just don't, they look back and they just feel like they just put their lives at risk for no good reason. So that's there. And then the ongoing conversations around a possible indictment of the former president, Donald Trump, and his prospective another run for the presidency in 2024. That's not new at all. It's just ongoing. So where I'm going with this, and it's kind of, it's taking a different slant on your question. I don't see anything particularly new other than the bank failure and the federal government's involvement with that, and some of the reasons that they're attributing to the bank failure. Like on the right, they're saying, well, these banks were really kind of run in a woke liberal way, and their boards of directors really weren't that good at finance because they were trying to be diverse and honor like all different kinds of people. So that's just all the same stuff, the woke and cancel debates. So that's what's in the news. And for me, it's sad, although not surprising, because it's all the things that I wrote about. The book came out in 2022, but it evolved over about 6 years, 3 years of really writing. And so the point I make in the book is these underlying aspects of American Shadow, and they're at least as prevalent as they have been for the last 246 going on 247 years, and probably more so nowadays. So I don't see anything. I wish I saw something that was new, but I just see different iterations, different manifestations of the very things that you and I have been talking about. And neither the elected leadership nor the paid, what I like to refer to as the paid performance news commenters, none of them seem to be aware of what you and I are talking about, or if they are aware of it, they choose not to say it out loud. So it's like they don't know the big picture, they don't know the history, or they can't see it. So for me, that's sad, and it's not new. It's the very reason that I wrote the book, and the very reason that you and I, engage in these conversations. So I wish I could give you a more optimistic answer.
Well, no, I wasn't saying it was just strictly out of curiosity more so than looking for a ray of hope, or just kind of wanted to see what your thoughts were based on the news cycles and what's been happening in the news lately. But why don't you go ahead and get us into our topic today?
Yeah, thanks. So we're speaking about the Healing America's Narratives. Thank you. There's the book image. The subtitle is The Feminine, the Masculine, and Our Collective National Shadow, and a little tagline beneath that which says Becoming More Fully Human. And again, you and I are speaking in this context of fully human connections. So we've been spending, I don't know, a couple of months now, probably, or close to a couple of months, in chapter 11, which is the next to last chapter of the book, and it's entitled So Now What? The first 10 chapters deliver evidence of the shadow, of the American shadow, and points to problems that we face. And chapter 11 begins the conversation about some individual and collective ways we might be able to address these problems. Not even might be able to, ways we definitely can begin to address the problems. And so today we're going to speak about a more collective approach, and specifically the idea of community making. And that's a phrase that Scott Peck used in his 1987 book, The Different Drum. Now, Scott Peck was a psychiatrist, an American psychiatrist, and he had this groundbreaking book in 1978 entitled The Road Less Traveled, one of the earliest books that connected psychology and spirituality. Again, he was a psychiatrist. It was on the New York Times bestseller list for over 10 years. I don't know if it set the record or not, but it was. It's still a relevant book in my estimation, although it's no longer new. And about 9 years later, he wrote a book called The Different Drum, where he spoke about what he and some of his colleagues had been doing in the ensuing years after The Road Less Traveled came out. And they ran these experiments with community making, and they discovered 4 basic stages that are very, very typical when people come together in an attempt to build community. And I'll just say them first, speak a little bit about how I think they're relevant to Healing America's narratives, and you and I can see where we want to take this. So the 4 stages of community are pseudo community, make-believe community. And when that fades, we move into chaos. And if we're fortunate enough to get out of chaos, we move into emptiness. And according to Peck and his colleagues, it's only through emptiness that true community can emerge. And other folks who we may speak about in future episodes, Otto Scharmer from MIT, Thomas Hübl, who's a spiritual guide and mystic, have their own approaches to collective work. And they don't use exactly the same language, but they describe the same scenario. So from pseudo community, which is messy and making believe, denying, to chaos, trying to fix other people, to emptiness, getting quiet, and finally moving into true community. So from where I sit, the United States is a country still in its adolescence. If you look at other nations and how long they've been on the planet as nations, we're just 246 years old. Again, we'll turn 247 this year. And we are, without a doubt, in chaos. We're a mix of chaos and pseudo community. There are some people who are trying to make believe that we're all getting along, but it seems as though many Americans, leadership and those being led, are in this chaotic state where we're trying to fix each other and point our fingers. Here's what you need to do. Here's what the problem is. I mean, I gave the example of the failure of the Silicon Valley Bank, where there was actually a Wall Street Journal opinion piece. And it appeared all over the news, on broadcast news too, where they said, I hate to laugh about this because it's really sad, but the Wall Street Journal columnist basically said that he thinks that it was Silicon Valley Bank's attempt to honor diversity and have a lot of different types of people on their board and in their upper level management that led to the collapse. And then he put like a little disclaimer. He said, now, I'm not saying that 12 white guys could have avoided the collapse, which was, there were some complex financial things that went on there. But he said that. He said, but I'm not saying 12 white guys would have avoided it. But that's what he was saying, basically, that they were too diverse. That's why they failed. And then lots of people on the far right and then on Fox were basically talking about it was really wokeism that led to the failure of the bank. Now, I'm no economist, you know that, and you're way more versed in finance and capital and investing than I am. But I know enough about the banking system that those banks didn't fail. That bank didn't fail because their board was too diverse. Right? They failed due to a lot of things that had to do with the changes that the Fed was making because of trying to stop inflation, maybe some mismanagement, maybe some wrong-headed investments.
And treasury bonds. Treasury
bonds. So but it wasn't because they were too woke. But this is what people who get paid to interpret the news and speak about the economy were saying out loud in public. All right, that's chaos. Right? There's nothing valid or in any way related to community with those kinds of statements. And the problem is a lot of people who are as ignorant as I am about large scale economics and the workings of the banks and the stock market and everything and the bonds, which I know a little bit enough to invest my own money a little bit, but that's not my area of expertise. But a lot of people believe what they hear. So there are people like on LinkedIn now who are in the business world who are saying, yeah, there's wokeism again at its worst, causing bank failures now. So that's the chaos piece. And I call it out when the left does it, and I'll call it out when the right does it. And right now, this particular example is the right is saying things that are inane. They're idiotic. They're not based in fact. So on the large scale, and I'll bring this to a close within 90 seconds here, on a large scale, if we aspire to have a nation that is in fact a community, not without differences and disagreements and things, but that we have this one, we do have this sense of being one, which we really don't now. We absolutely do not have that I can experience. There are pockets of it. What we need eventually to do at scale is move through chaos. And the way you do that is enough people have to realize what they're doing. Oh, the finger pointing, blaming the other side or those other people or whatever, that doesn't seem to be working. And you get to a point where you just get exhausted and you take a breath and you stop and you get quiet. And you worry maybe you're scared, but you just get quiet and you just see what comes. That's emptiness. And there's research that shows that that's the way you move into getting along with others, to getting into true community. We're far from that right now. But the model itself is worth knowing about because you can recognize it in your family, you can recognize it in the workplace. Looking at it at scale is really hard, like in 330 million person nation. But you can kind of see it like in local family community stuff. So pseudo community, chaos, emptiness, true community. That's what we're looking at as one of the tools that might help us as a nation.
When you was talking about how, they were saying that wokeism is the reason the bank failed. It's interesting because in today's culture, more so than ever, I've seen before, is they hire these pundits to speak to people's agenda. So I really believe that folks who will say that want to believe that. Like, you're not going to do any more research, additional research to challenge that thought. It fits your narrative. I mean, it fits that agenda and you accept it. Okay, yeah, wokeism crossed the bank because this country's becoming too woke. And this is another example of why we need to do anything we can to stop it on all fronts. And that's why I'm going to either elect this politician and, or I'm going to do whatever reaction I'm going to have with it because it fits my narrative. As we talked before, and you've written in your book, everybody has a story. Everybody has a narrative. And just like, I don't know you remember or even knew about this, but during the time when those police officers in Milwaukee, those black police officers brutally beat the gentleman to death. They put him over and they beat him to death. And one of the guy who's known for being a conservative, he's a black gentleman who's been known to be a conservative sports analyst, had to never come out and say, well, it's because they did that because the single mothers and black women heading households are the reason that happened. Like, he derived that from that, and that became his. And he got put on Fox News, on Tucker Carlson. They gave him a platform to espouse that silliness. And again, it just speaks to, as you said before, chaos. So now politically, politicians have learned, and I think really this is the era of Trump. This is what Trump really created the most. And he realized that really politics have always kind of had chaos on the fringes. And I think Trump realized that I'm going to take it full in. I'm going to really exploit the whole chaos ideology behind in politics and really bring it to the forefront and get it away from platforms and policies and just really focus on the chaotic issues. Because if you look at pop culture or American culture, that's what we're really interested in it today anyway. That's where social media is. It's the more insatiable headlines to get people to click on things. You know what I'm saying? And that's what that is. You want the sound bites. You want the shock value.
Yeah.
And you know, we toyed with that back in the day. I'm kind of forgetting his name now, but he was a white gentleman, had a talk show, and he called it Shock TV, something like that, where he would have different guests on his Mortensen or
I know who you mean. It'll come to me. I can picture his face too. It'll come to me.
Yeah, he would have different people with opinions that were, you know, on the fringes that would never get normal TV time anywhere else. He would bring them on, whether they were Black nationalists that would never get eyes or white nationalists that would never get attention. He would bring them on the show for debate. And again, it was to create that chaos that you talked about. So chaos now seems to be the goal of both sides, as you said. And I don't think what people are considering, or maybe they are considering, is the ramifications down the road of where we're leading to right now. And I'm going to wrap my point up by saying this. It's similar to, and I grew up off this gangster rap music. Like when I grew up off rap, we had different forms of rap. We had party rap, we had educational rap, we had Black education, historical rap. Then gangster rap came up, but my generation was able to decipher which rap we wanted to use and listen to, and it wasn't just one form of rap. Now, gangster rap over the last 10 to 15 years became a dominant rap that gets played constantly. And now we're seeing the ramifications of that, where I saw in the news of the day from the chaos where New York has arrested like 35 gang members, a task force, because they're doing what's called, I believe, a drill rap, where these gangbangers now actually sang in songs and putting videos up of murders they've committed and actually saying lyrics that talk about the guns they've used. So they really just are openly testifying on music. And my point is, that's the chaos. That's the where that has gone. And no one saw that coming, that you can create these gangster rap stories. First, they were just talking about, well, it's like a movie, like a horror movie. I'm just giving you a visualization of my neighborhood. I'm being an artist. So now we have young folks who don't care about being artists. They just take it now and they've run it to the point where they're saying names and they're living out the violence they're advocating for. And that's what I'm saying, that this is going to be in the next generation, the political fallout from all this chaos politics is going to have a worse impact. Like we're getting worse, and that's what we need to be mindful of. Is what's going to happen in the future when other generations don't have the context that we had to decipher how to choose between what's less chaotic politics and not coming from that background, but all they know is chaotic politics.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. And it's, at its it used to be that at its best, government could be, at least theoretically, it wasn't always this for everybody, and I know that, could be a somewhat stabilizing force to kind of keep the strong in check and kind of protect the weak, and strong and weak in any iteration of that, whether it's financial, physical strength, whatever, to try to be a stabilizing force. And as you said, Donald Trump brought chaos mainstream. He made it, the convention. Even to the point that I remember one of the most striking comments I remember hearing, this was during the 2016 presidential campaign, if I recall correctly, that one of his advisors, Steve Bannon, who was the founder of, I think Breitbart, and, a far right thinker and kind of an anti-federal government guy in many ways, he basically said out loud that it's not the Democrats or the liberals that are the enemy, it's the media. And what we need to do is to flood the zone with shit. That's a direct quote. Flood the zone with shit, meaning just keep on putting anything out there so that you can't really tell what's true and what's not. And they succeeded at that. Because now, like, if you're getting your news from, pick a social media, if you're getting your news from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, any of those, you're in trouble. Because those aren't news agencies, sorry.
Right.
And it's I'm laughing as I say it, because if this would, if maybe Mel Brooks will make another movie before he dies, because he's like 96 or 97 now. But it's the kind of movie where, he would just parody different things. I mean, he got away with making a parody of Hitler, and only someone like Mel Brooks could get away with that as a Jewish man.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I just want to jump in on that point. He has created a new series on Hulu called History of the World Part 2.
Yeah.
So I just want to say it to that
point.
No,
you're right. Because that's probably why he came to mind. I haven't seen it yet, but I know that's there. So maybe he's touching on some of this. But there are aspects of it that are so ludicrous that it is funny, except that it's leading to much pain and suffering for millions of people. And from where I'm sitting, the gradual deterioration of this country, and on a larger scale, in one particular issue, of the planet, because we have a big impact on the planet and the climate in this country. So there's nothing really funny about it. I think we do need to enjoy satire and parody from talented artists, but it's some serious things that we're speaking about. And the best and the brightest, as I like to say, and that's not even true, best and the brightest, the people who are in leadership positions and the people who are, in news, getting paid $1 million plus a year to comment on the news on the left and the right, they play whack-a-mole every day. They have these little hammers, and they hit this issue and they hit that issue and they argue about that, and they're just playing whack-a-mole. They've been doing that for years, and they think that they're saying something important, and they're missing extraordinarily bigger picture. And I would love to be invited to speak to any of them in one of their platforms. I'm not holding my breath on the invitation though, so because they're not seeing what's really important. That there's this underlying pattern that's almost 250 years old, that makes America and you and I have said this before, in the third decade of the 21st century, this version of America is inevitable. If you look at the history, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone who has even a vague notion, with all due respect to middle school, of middle school level history. You don't need to be a historian. You don't need to go deep into history, but it's not hidden somewhere. I'm not a historian, but we are in this chaotic stage, and I don't see. Looking ahead, I don't see light at the end of the chaos tunnel right now. We're at the kind of on the precipice. If we have another, God forbid, pandemic, or if we had another terrorist attack, serious terrorist attack, or anything that really instilled more fear into Americans, so the left and the right would point their fingers at each other again. That's really scary, because the democracy is very, very fragile right now. And we're not trying to resolve it together. were blaming each other.
Yeah, and to that point, I was watching in this. I can't think of her name right now. Her name's really not important as to the story. It's his mother of five that wrote a book on wokeism and schools or something like that. And she's getting all this, publicity because she's talking about how this one teacher, I forgot exactly how the quote went, but basically one of the kids had asked about, is it okay for a young girl to like another young girl? And the teacher came out and said, that's not a problem with that. And so she used that as to write the basis of her book. And she quotes that scenario in her book to say that these teachers now in education is too woke, and she talked about how wokeism needs to be dealt with and everything else. And she's been interviewed on this news show called The Hill, and one analyst asked her, well, you keep mentioning woke, define what woke means. And she couldn't do it. Yeah. And she literally, she tried to talk around it, but she could not define it. And she gave her literally like 3 or 4 minutes to talk about it. And she just really, and the woman who was asked the question even had to say, well, this is going to be a viral moment, because she realized she couldn't say it. And that's going back to the whole chaotic point, is that most people don't really understand what you said earlier, even about the banks. They don't really understand these terms that's being used. Right. But it gets used so much, it gets thrown around constantly, that you think you know what you're talking about. You say, okay, this is woke and this is too much woke stuff happening. And you really can't even define what woke is. And that's the problem, is that people now are not even thinking. And what you're saying about social media, so you can tell quickly in a conversation, at least I can tell within a 2-minute conversation, where a person gets their information from, as you say, news. Like if you're getting your news from either Fox, or MSNBC, or CNN, I can tell by your conversation. If you're getting it from Twitter or Facebook, which is even worse, because then you're getting it from folks who got it from there. And, so that's even third party, as it gets passed along, it's changing, and they're incorporating their flair to it. And you don't do any facts or research. And now people are so consumed with trying to survive, you don't have time to fact check anything. So you accepting things as you can, because your phone is giving you notifications instantly, and you're taking that verbatim as, this is where I'm getting my news, this keeps me informed, this is all I need to do. And then you go out here and you try to function in the world, and to your point, you're functioning in a chaotic world. But yet and still, my question for folks is, this is the engineer in me coming out, what do you hope is the outcome? Mm-hmm. I mean, at some point you have to ask yourself, it's like, for example, if I know that because I'm feeling depressed, or I'm feeling frustrated or let down, so I figure that I want to eat some bad food that's going to help give me some immediate gratification. Mm-hmm. Right? So I'm going to eat some ice cream, some chocolate, whatever. After about 3 or 4 days of eating that way, or whenever it clicks, eventually my mind's going to say, well, the outcome is that I'm going to be, not only out of shape, but I'm also going to increase the likelihood of, diabetes. I'm going to have cavities. I'm going to have a whole bunch of other negative things. So but then I have to weigh that consequence to say, I don't care. I rather just enjoy the immediate gratification of that. So that's my question. I wanted the people who let themselves get caught in the chaos, do they ever stop and think for a moment, what is the outcome that I want? Am I ready to accept that outcome as a result of my choices that I'm making today?
Yeah, there's a lot that in what you just said. The one thing I want to go back to the woman who wrote the book about wokeism based on what happened in a classroom, and she made it to TV. Couldn't answer. Couldn't describe what the title of her book meant, basically, which is, talking systemically, somewhere there was a publisher willing to publish that book from a woman who were speaking about wokeism who couldn't say what it was. So there's a systemic issue. I mean, I have this myth of publishing, as an industry. It used to be something that had some honor in it. And, now you can self-publish, and, anybody with a little bit of technical ability can kind of just write something and put it out there in the world. I haven't read this book, so I'm not going to comment on the book itself. But it's to the point that you were making. When I'm engaged in conversations with folks on topics like being woke or cancel culture or critical race theory or intersectionality, and again, those aren't, the focal point of my life. I'm more of a generalist, but I did a lot of research because I needed to write about them and know what I was talking about. Very few people, when asked about intersectionality, being woke, or critical race theory, especially critical race theory. Like, you ask somebody, what is critical race theory? Now, obviously, a critical race theorist can answer it, somebody who actually is a critical race theorist, and somebody who actually uses critical race theory, especially in the legal profession. But most of the pundits who talk about it, if you ask them directly what they're talking about, they can't answer it. And at best, they'll give an example of somebody else who used the idea of being woke or the idea of intersectionality in a really unskillful way. And there's examples of that. There are well-intentioned educators who learned a little bit about critical race theory or being woke, and then used it in their classrooms. And this is a tiny minority of people. It's not like every educator in every school. And just were unskillful with it because they themselves didn't really fully understand what it was they were conveying. Mm-hmm. And to the example that, again, this is now fourth hand because, you saw or read about the interview this woman, the author, did on the show when she was asked what wokeism was. She couldn't answer it, but the example about a little girl says to the teacher, "Is it okay for one little girl to like another little girl?" And she said, "Sure, that's okay." Now, she called that wokeism and used it as a criticism of the teacher and the school system. And from where I'm sitting, here's what that teacher was faced with. Could she have been more skillful? Who knows? You and I don't know what she really said or exactly what happened. But could she have been more skillful? Maybe. But what she did in that moment was honor any child in the classroom who may have been beginning to be attracted to someone of the same sex. Of course, it's okay to love somebody who's just like you. And I don't know what else she said, but if it's a bad thing to say, yeah, it's okay to love anyone, then we're really in trouble. Now, that's an oversimplification, but that teacher was put in a really difficult situation. Take the opposite answer. And this is what, people who critically think and who really do reflect are able to do. Suppose the teacher said, no, that's absolutely wrong. A little girl should never love a little boy, and a little girl rather, and a little boy should never love a little boy. That's a sin, in fact. That's against God. It's against nature. Is that a good answer, to some, grade school kid? So in some ways, the biggest possible picture for me, let's all love one another, boys and girls, because, the hate and the war and the violence really isn't working out too well. Right? Now that's, big picture, that's easy to kind of say. But in the nuanced moment, when a little kid asks that question, whether she's asking because she already thinks it's wrong, or whether she's asking because she's attracted to another girl, a good educator has to be able to answer that question skillfully in that moment. And not fall into the educator's own biases, but to honor this child. And that's not easy to do. If you're, let's say that was a fifth grade classroom, I'm making that up, fourth grade, fifth grade classroom. And so maybe the teacher has been teaching for 2 or 3 years. So she's 24, 25, right? Has her degree, has her teaching license, hasn't lived too long in the overall scheme of things, is only a decade and a half, give or take, older than her students. So there's not a lot of life experience and wisdom there yet. There's knowledge and training. So it's a much more complex question and scenario for me to look at that. And the last thing I'll say, because I know I'm kind of going off here, the idea of everybody grabbing onto wokeism and using it to blame wokeism for everything that goes wrong now. It's wrong in the schools. It causes bank failures. You know, that's the idiocy of the argument. But it also points directly to, in Robert Keegan's model of adult development. Again, he's the grandfather of adult developmental research. His research is going on 50 years old, give or take. And he talks about a move in development from the socialized mind, which is the mind you and I have spoken about, cultural givens, where I've been socialized by my culture, by my society, and I agree with what I'm given by other people. That's the socialized mind. And again, this is all research-based. It's not some guy sitting around making things up.
Right.
The developmental move after the socialized mind, and the language is really so clear here, is if you do move, you go from the socialized mind to the self-authoring mind. Just, don't even have to explain that, all right? From being socialized to being self-authoring. And there's more after that, which we don't need to get into. So anybody who grabs a hold of the wokeism argument, probably out of fear, because they've heard so many bad things about it, and doesn't do their own research, they're stuck in the socialized mind. And I would argue that everybody who thinks that Fox News is telling the truth, and everybody thinks that MSNBC has it exactly right, are working from their own versions of a socialized mind. Now, the one distinction I don't want to make the same mistake that Russell Brand made on the Bill Maher show, last week. I'm not equating Fox and MSNBC. Fox spins the news to the right. MSNBC spins the news to the left. Fox News has, on a daily basis for years, said things that were provably untrue on their broadcasts. Their commentators have done that. Hannity, Carlson, Ingerman. They've admitted it now in court because of the Dominion lawsuit. MSNBC, for the most part, you can disagree with their eye rolls and their spins, but they don't tell lies on a day-to-day basis. They're not putting things out there that are provably false. So that's what differentiates them. But they definitely deliver their own versions of spin on the news. And the eye rolling, holier than thou. Tucker Carlson does it. Folks on MSNBC do it. Yeah, I can't watch any of that.
Exactly.
I can't, because don't do that to me. I want to say, and here's my arrogance. I'm smarter than all of you. I can see right through what you're doing. Stop rolling your eyes, because what you're doing is you're performing. You're in the entertainment business. You're no longer in the news business. You're not a journalist. You're rolling your eyes and performing for the camera. You're not delivering journalism. And unfortunately, there's tens of millions of Americans on the left and right who still want to buy into that. And that's part of the chaos. So, sorry, that was a bit of a rant there.
Well, no, it was right on point, because that's the world we live in now, to the point where, and I'm big into self-growth, personal development. And one of the things I learned early on and understood was, you are your thoughts, basically. And your thoughts are what you consume. It's like people say that forever, you are what you eat, so be mindful of what you eat. Not liking now Fox News, MSNBC, CNN, to like McDonald's. Like McDonald's doesn't really care about trying to give you healthy food. I mean, every now and then they try to change some of the marketing, but then you realize their salad's not even healthy, you know. So they understand that. But folks who still go to McDonald's and think that if I get a Big Mac, a large fry, and a Diet Coke, I'm making a healthy choice because I got a Diet Coke. To me, are the same people who would consume Fox News or MSNBC and expect an unbiased critique or analysis. It's like if I watch NBC and Fox News, right? Maybe Fox News does it lies more deliberately about things, and MSNBC are a little more biased in what they're trying to feed you. But at the end of the day, it's still unbiased. It's still somewhat misleading. It's still not giving you, as Fox says in their tagline, unbiased information. You know, and this is where the critical thinkers have to come into play, which I think all this fits into the whole social media thing of controlling your thoughts. The more you are tuned in or online and accessible by these electronic devices that can give you notifications and make you look at your phone, uh, and make it more customizable for you to make your phone fit exactly the way you want it. It looks the way you want it to look with the case, the chimes, notifications, or the kind of music you want. The more you are now attached to that device.
Yeah.
And eventually it's going to get to the point where technology is going to be where you can just wake up and implant the device in you. And you don't have to worry about having anything external. It's going to be something you can just either put in your ear or put on some glasses, and it's going to be connected to you at every level. And I think that's where it's going to go. And my point I'm going with this is that because you said they're in an entertainment business, they're going to continue to entertain, just like McDonald's is going to continue to give you food. It's not necessarily nourishing for you at all. It's not, and what they're giving you is not spiritually, mentally, socially fulfilling at all. It's fast, it's greasy, it's heavy, it's gratifying, and it fits that mind where I just want something quick. I want something salty or sweet, and it's going to give me that little endorphin that's going to trigger that in my mind. And that's where, to me, consuming that information is the same thing. It's going to trigger those endorphins in my mind. It's going to, like I said, it's going to fit my cultural givens already. If I don't like Black people, then that's going to make me not like Black people even more. Show me a clip of Black folks doing, rioting, say Black Lives Matter. Yeah, that's why I don't like Black people. Or if I don't like gay people, show me an example of wokeism in this context. Yeah, exactly. This is why I don't like gay people. It fits that narrative. It's like the same thing. If I eat McDonald's, all I want is that salt and that sweet taste. Yes, it satisfies that craving for right now. But the sad thing about it, just like McDonald's, is not filling. And so what it does is it makes you want to come back again. Think about this: that MSNBC, Fox, CNN have their programming where if you have the time, you can sit there all day and just watch that and just get fed that all day, every single day, what these people are saying. And anyone who does that, I guarantee you, they're probably the most depressed, stressed out, anxious people in the world. Just like the people who would just eat fast food all day are going to be the most unhealthiest, higher rate for any kind of medical condition out there. They're going to be completely out of shape. And that's where I say, when do the people have to, at some point, begin to make the choices that I'm going to turn that off and I give myself this food. I'm going to do it in moderation is where I'm going. How do people deal with chaos in moderation?
Yeah. So one of the last things you said, I don't have a definitive answer for everyone with regard to how you do that. But one of the last things you said, referring to the device, the TV or the phone or whatever it is, or the computer, you said to turn it off. And that's a perfect phrase for the move from chaos to emptiness. And that, again, from pseudo community to chaos to emptiness to community. until we, all of us, every individual gets to the point of the chaos where, oh, I'm killing myself with this, whether it's the fast food or the junk news. And to have that moment of insight to say, I need to stop, I need to turn it off, both literally and metaphorically. And then in emptiness, and which is a really uncomfortable place if you've been full of fast food and fast news and information for a long time. Emptiness can be, and quiet can be a really scary place because suddenly a lot of things can begin to emerge. The mind is a unique thing, but it's necessary to get quiet. So getting quiet and learning how to be with the quiet. And there are people, teachers, spiritual leaders. I mean people who are really devoted to helping people. There's a lot of snake oil sales people out there who would take your money and because they read a book about something and think they know what they're talking about. And, but there are some real good teachers out there. You can learn, and therapists, coaches, you can learn how to be with the quiet, and to look to, we talk about letting things go. So letting go the fast food and the junk news. And once you get quiet, you let things come. Because the universe at large, our unique species, when we get quiet, it's very uncomfortable at first, but we begin to listen with different ears and to see with different eyes, and to feel in a different way. And some pretty amazing, beautiful things can come out of that silence. That's the reason that for millennia, people inside of major religious traditions, mystics, and people outside of any tradition have gone into the desert, into the cave, up to the mountaintop, stopped eating for a while, and just sat and got quiet. They've done it again. Christian mystics, Muslim mystics, Jewish mystics, Buddhist mystics, Hindu mystics, and lots of others. And then people who were not tied to any religion. They get quiet. They sit for a while. They learn. They bring their gifts back to their communities. That's what we're talking about here. So it's definitely doable. Most of us, I think, need help with it. I know I did. I paid money to get help, to go and sit quietly with no food in a safe way in the canyon lands in Utah back in the 1990s. I did that. Unique experience. All the comforting consolations were gone. My refrigerator was gone. I didn't even have a cell phone. I don't know, in the 90s, I forget what I had. Maybe a flip phone. I don't even know. Didn't go there to sightsee. Didn't have a camera. Had a little tarp I was sleeping underneath, and no food for 4 days. That'll give you a different view of things. So find a version of that. Each of us can find a version. I don't have to go out into the canyonlands. Do it at home in the living room. Turn the TV set off. Sit in a chair. Right, sit in the park. Just get quiet. See what happens.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a old quote. I'm trying to remember the author, but it basically said, God speaks only to the quiet mind. So when you get your mind quiet to what you're saying, that's when because they say when you pray, you're speaking to God. But when you meditate, that's when God speaks to you. So it is in that quietness, in that stillness. And that's what we always say. I mean, think about this expression. When people say, what do you really want at the end of the day? I just want peace of mind. I want quiet mind, right? That's a way of saying that, because in chaos, your mind is just going everywhere. That's why a lot of folks can't sleep, because your mind's racing. It's just so many thoughts filling your head up constantly, So that's what I believe, that what you just laid out in our discussion today is so important, because I think first you have to recognize that there is chaos in your world. It's like, because you don't recognize it, and I just made this my point real quick, that if you walk out in the middle of the streets and you see that there are folks who are on my street, for example, I walk out my building and and I see the trash, and I see the broken bottles everywhere, and I see the homeless people walking down the street and the drug addicts. If I see all that from my peripheral, and I miss the rose in the middle of the garden across the street,
Hmm.
that's because I allow myself to just be so chaotic in that space. I have to tune my mind to focus on that rose, and if I can find that rose across the street that's growing, then I can find peace.
Yeah.
So that's where I just want to leave people with. But we reached the top of our hour, and we reached the point of the show where we want to give examples of who we feel has been, or who we past or present, someone who is currently living the fully human lifestyle or has lived the fully human lifestyle. So Reggie, who would you want to share with our listening audience? Might be somebody that you find to be on that level.
Yeah. So thanks for that. And so I almost did this last week or the week before, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't just doing it as a quid pro quo. So somebody that I think you know pretty well, but the person that I think is living a fully human life is a guy by the name of Christopher King. He goes by King very often for various reasons that he's explained to me. Um, but I've known you for, it'll be a year in June. We haven't even known each other for a year yet. And as I get to know you better and what you're doing in the world better, beyond our conversations, which have been about my book for the most part, um, I just have a deep level of respect and admiration. First of all, for the things that you do in the world that I have no real knowledge of. In your background as an engineer, raising capital to really do good work with people, and the community that you're building, beyond our little one-on-one conversations here, is just really impressive to me. And it's all the more impressive because, for whatever reasons, when we met, you tuned into what I was doing and felt that it would be a good thing to do for us to continue, speaking once a week in this format. So I'm both deeply grateful to you, and I also have a deep level of respect for you because of the larger work that you're doing. This is part of that. Um, and for me, it's more amazing here in this third decade of the 21st century because we've really never met in person. So, we're just these two guys that are, living probably, I've driven to Baltimore a couple of times in my life, probably 6.5, 7 hour drive for me from here. Um, uh, so I'm just really, grateful for that. And so I'm, tying it in with gratitude, but I see you as somebody who is living this fully human life, in really beautiful ways. So you're my choice today, King.
Reggie, thank you. I humbly appreciate that, and I accept that because I believe that one of the things about giving is receiving.
Mm.
So I receive and accept that, and I think that's an important part of flow. And thank you for recognizing that because that's my goal. I strive to do that, and that's why I was attracted to being a part of doing the show with you and what you're doing the work with the fully human work that you're doing. It's because I realized that they gave me the language to say that's what I'm striving to be on a daily basis. That growth mindset to continually grow is to continue to figure out how to be fully human and become more of that. And I know that's a lifetime goal. It's never going to go to the point where I'm saying, okay, I've reached it. What's
Yeah.
next?
Yeah.
It's an ongoing dynamic move because every day you're going to make mistakes and you have to learn from those mistakes. And so in that journey, you know, I'm going to honor someone who I feel has been very instrumental in my life, and that's Stephen R. Covey.
Mm.
And he's passed, but he's written the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And I mentioned him because, like I said, I read his books over. His books are study books. They're not, to me, books you just read and say, okay, I've read it. It's a book you live by. So you have to read it on a daily basis to see how the wisdom can be reflected in today's actions and choices. And the reason I say him is because of the fact is, as we talked about the chaos and people having their bias, I read his book for over 20 years, never knew he was a Mormon until one day I was doing research. When he died, that's when I found out he was a Mormon. When folks mentioned his life, and I was like, wow, he was a Mormon. But I never got that from his teaching. He never fed that into his writings. He never tried to steer his readers to becoming a Mormon. He never shared that personal thing. So he studied similar to what you do. He had resources, and he just laid out what he understood to be from all the different spiritualities and dogmas and all the things I've done. I've come up with these 7 habits of how you should live your life by. And to me, he's an example of that. He shared that in every way he could, as far as continually providing education that was very thought-provoking, very engaging. And he just was a person who I know not only touched my life, but touched the lives of so many other people. And through his teachings, helped put me on the path to becoming that fully human that you recognize that I'm working towards being on a daily basis. So thank you. That he's my person I want to add or select for today.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I read that back when it came out as well, and it was one of the first books I gave away. I was working out of college at the time, and I gave it to my. I forced some of the college students who were working for me to read it. I gave it to them as gifts and said, "Now you have to read this." But yeah, I love that book, and so I love that you chose him.
And the 7th habit is sharpen the saw.
Yep.
Right. So as we talk about this and become more fully human, that's why I'm so, I would say, obsessed. That's a word I want to use with the growth mindset of doing it, everything that I do and everything that I'm living. And I just really want to add this last part as we wrap up our show. It's funny. I met this gentleman who I had done business with previously about 3-4 years ago. He happened to be in town. He wanted to get together. And so him and I ended up going to a restaurant. Long story short, I didn't realize he was meeting his family there. I thought him and I would meet and it would be more of a business social type of network, but it didn't turn out to be. And his family had a female friend, and I spent my time mostly talking to her because there was too many people that really talked to anyone else. And she happened to be the oddball, like I was the oddball. But my point I was going with this, she was single, she was somewhat attractive. But what's interesting, and I want people to think about this, whether it's a woman or a man, again, we're only in a conversation at most for about maybe 30, 40 minutes, and she begin to lay out the problems with men. Mm-hmm. Right. And my point of saying this is if you have that in your conversation on the first couple of dates with somebody, this wasn't really technically a date, but it was us getting to know each other, and you're telling me the problems you have with men, this is the essence of why you're single. Right. And I'm not saying just for women. If a man's saying the same thing, here's a problem with women. If I'm saying this is my first meeting with you, this is why I'm single. So this is where I'm going with the growth mindset is that, and sharpen the saw. And I want to bring it to a close is you should always lead with something positive. And it's not so much bring your representative with you, but you should train your mind to people are only attracted to things that they're going to learn from and grow from and feel they can get value from. I get no value from meeting someone who's laying out a whole bunch of a diatribe and negative things about men or women. That's not something I want to hear. Mm-hmm. And you're not somebody I want to connect with. Like I have no interest in, let's continue this conversation later. Like I don't need to, that's not something I want to add to my energy level at all. So I just want to share that thought and get people mindful of why I advocate as you progress down the path or choose first to be on the path to become a fully human, choose to be, it's a difference between being the right and doing the right thing, and choose to do the right thing as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, that's a good story. I would like to think if I was in that conversation, I would have said to her, so do you think that's true about me personally?
Absolutely. Well, again, Reggie, thank you again for investing the time and writing a book and for investing the time to constantly be on the show every Wednesday at 10 to bring a well thought out, insightful conversation that's interesting, thought provoking, and giving us words of wisdom that we can now take on to help us down the journey to become a more fully human. And I want to thank our listening audience again for those who tune in now or tune in as you receive this information down the road. Please engage with us on Facebook, YouTube, and write your comments. Let us know what you think about what we're saying. And if you have any questions, definitely we read them. We love to get engaged with you. So until next Wednesday at 10 a.m., I wish everybody a blessed and productive day.